Welcome to Bring Out Your Badass Self, a movement to break your negative thoughts and habits and instead focus on building each other up and encouraging fearless authenticity.
Each week, we will get vulnerable and share experiences alongside our guests and audience. Come rediscover your inner badass self.
Hey, good morning,
Kenny. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, I just want to let you know that I reconnected to Facebook, but again this morning we are having issues. So for the next 2 weeks, I might end up having to reset the past ones so we can make sure that Facebook is going to work. So I'm not sure what is going on there and why it is that we're having issues there. So I'm hoping that those people on Facebook will go to either LinkedIn or YouTube. So we will see.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and we're so dependent on this technology. So when it doesn't do what we want, it's just frustrating. I see Bruce has joined us.
Let's remove that. That's going to be our topic today. Let's see, Bruce. Where is he at? There he is. Good morning. And with the badassery, and let the badass commensurate, begin. Absolutely.
I love it.
So good morning, Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce.
So Kate, as you can see, I'm at the cabin today. So
yeah. How's that going?
It's going well. I just got in Wednesday night. And my husband has already been here at the cabin and enjoyed a couple of days actually without me. He decided to take the whole week off. The kids are on fall break. So we came to the cabin to enjoy it.
I love that. So do they get like a whole week for fall break, or do they get just part a week, or how does that work?
Thursday, Friday, and then Monday. But I'm actually flying out on Monday as well. So I have the next 2 weeks are super crazy for me. So
I know.
Heading out next week, and then for a smaller event, a sales enablement event, and then the next week we have our big conference. And so you'll be hanging back and taking in all those leads and information that we're sending you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love conference time, even though I don't attend. It's my jam to get leads, so.
Yeah, absolutely. We do a good job, especially that first day that we go. It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to wear that awesome red dress again, or you got to switch it up?
I'm going to switch it up. Yeah. So I have actually a black jumpsuit that I'm gonna wear, and then
with wide pants, or like
a little wider.
Yeah. I've looked at those. I had this jumpsuit when I was a teenager that I've always been wanting to like recreate or find again. It was just the best. And those can be so fun if you find the one that like fits right and feels good. Yeah,
no, this one was really good. I actually do Stitch Fix, so I have Stitch Fix sent to me, and it was one that they sent to me, and I normally wouldn't do a jumpsuit, but whenever I put it on, my husband was like, yeah.
So you're like,
it must be good. So
yes, but it doesn't take much, right? It doesn't,
no,
Jenna
not
does
for my
the same
husband.
thing. Yeah, Jenna does the same thing. Like I can walk in the room and be looking like real rough, and she'll be like, "Hey," I'm like, "Really? I'm in male boxers, and this t-shirt is not good." She'll be like, "I'm here for it."
That's funny.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to try to put the YouTube link again out for the Facebook users. But in the meantime, we have more people that have joined us.
Hello. That's exactly how she says it. Good morning, Steph. Good to see you. Good morning, Renee. You're one of my favorites.
Yeah, I get to see her
Always.
next week and then the following week in person. So
I know. Get to fill up your Renee cup.
that's right.
Mm. Good badass morning, Eric.
Yeah. Good morning, Eric. And so, well, Kate, today we're going to be talking about a wise mind.
Yes.
And I know that one of the things that we have been doing is instead of music, we've also been exploring some other things. And so this week I actually had come up with another poem. This week I put it to a video, and I don't know if everybody saw, but the previous one that I had written, I ended up putting to a video and did a short reel out there. But Kate is going to be focusing on, I'm putting even more pressure on her, that for in 2 weeks, she's going to be doing something art-wise as well. So
yes. More visual. And I have been writing. So I've been writing some poetry
that's
as
awesome.
well. So yeah, so not really ready to share anything yet, but I'm excited about that aspect. So, but I have some more visual art, and maybe we'll do a little music with it or something. I haven't decided yet, but
Yeah.
Kim has joined us. She says, "Good morning, beautiful badasses."
That's
Good morning,
awesome.
Kim. So good
All
to
right.
see you
So
always.
do we want to go ahead and play that particular poem, and then that'll allow me time to be able to post that out over to Facebook as well?
Yes,
All right,
do it.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and add this to the stage and start to play it.
In the symphony of life, where two forces collide, the rational brain and the heart side by side, a wise mind seeks balance, a dance intertwined, blending logic and emotion, a union divine. The rational brain, with its analytical might, calculates, strategizes, seeking what's right. But the emotional heart, with its intuitive sway, guides with empathy, lighting up the way. When thoughts and feelings intertwine in the tapestry of wisdom, their threads align. In perfect harmony, together they unite. A wise mind emerges. Let wisdom take flight.
I love it.
Did you like it?
I loved it. Thank you. I like the butterfly at the end. I think that's new from when I saw what you were working on, but I love it. The butterfly is like perfect. It's like transformation and all that fun stuff. All that's fun, painful stuff. I hear that I think that they've figured out that, what happens in the different stages of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, even though we often equate it with transformation and beautiful, it is, but at that those stages are really quite painful. Which I could imagine. I mean, all transformation is painful, right?
Yeah.
Change can be so painful.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was a past episode that Deborah actually talked to us a little bit about caterpillar, or if it was a separate conversation that we had with her talking about the transformation of a caterpillar.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember either if it was on here, if it made it to the show, or if it was just part of our prep.
I know. I can't remember sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you for the heart, Bruce. That was sweet. I'm really loving this creative side of you, Sarah, and just letting yourself kind of dive into it. That's cool. How is it feeling?
It's feeling good. I've been doing a lot of journaling for my dreams and different things like that. I've been working with Deborah on that. And I just feel like a lot of creativity has continued to evolve as well. So,
yeah. There's this really cool book called The Artist's Way. I had 2 copies, but I think I gave them both away. But there's this book. It's an old book, and it advocates that you do what she calls morning pages. And it sounds really similar to what you're doing. Like every morning when you wake up, you just write for 20 minutes. And no matter what your art is, even if your art is, is more physical or it's just your passion or whatever, but it's really cool when you can put the time to it and do it, and it kind of really opens up that side of you. So it feels like that's part of what you're doing right now is you're waking up every day and like just getting out whatever thoughts or whatever things happened in those 8 to 12 hours where you're like checked out kind of, but also checked in, right? You're like checked out of daily life, but you're checked into like some other weird realm.
Yeah, it's really tapping into your unconscious or the things that maybe you haven't necessarily explored. And so it continues to evolve. The more you dive in, the more it then reveals. And so you start to see other things about you.
Yeah. Yep.
So
yeah, definitely. Well, before we get too far into it, let's look at some of our other comments, and I'll give kind of a recovery update on how I'm doing. Bruce, I love this. Brains are fun. I love that you love your brain and the mind that dwells within. I love that.
That's awesome.
I think that's about your poem.
Yeah. Stephanie, thank you. That's so sweet. So where are you, Kate? Give us an update.
I'm doing well. I'm doing so well during the day. And I don't know if I'm just like busy, so I'm ignoring it. But like yesterday, I even found myself dancing, because I have a ball share, so I like dance while I work. And then when I do step out, I usually take my music. I find that if I step out into the wild, the space outside of my office, that if I, keep my music on, that I have an easier transition back into the office. So I can literally just step out for 10 minutes, maybe make myself something to eat, see if, there's a kid around that needs something to eat, and then, take care of that and come back in. And so when I was out there yesterday, I was like dancing, and like moving my hip, my chest and my hips or my ribs, and then later that day I was like, what is wrong? Last night I was like, what happened? And then I was like, because I was sore, and I was like, oh yeah, that little bit of dancing must have done it. But so, but in general, I'm just kind of tired, more than anything. So I'm looking forward. I'm 3 weeks in, and I've got 3 weeks to go before it's like official. So I'm looking forward to getting across the finish line and being my old self,
And you know me, so I'm going to tell you, don't overdo yourself.
Right.
Continue to just nurse yourself and slowly get back in there.
Yeah. Yep. I am. I did it, like this morning, I was like, okay, there's a lot of dishes, and normally I would want to do them before to start the day, because I'm kind of a little bit of a neat freak. And then it's like, you know what? No, let's just get through the Friday, and I'll worry about them later, or someone else will do them.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you want to jump into today's conversation?
Yes, I certainly do.
We alluded to it earlier. We had this up. So the 3 states of mind. Oh, and Adam just joined. So Adam, he said, cheers to your old self. Listen to that body, Miss Kate. So.
Oh, thank you. I will. I appreciate that, Adam.
Thanks for joining, Adam.
Yeah.
So today we were going to talk about the emotional, rational, and wise mind.
Yes.
And Kate and I are also going to ask the audience to participate along the way. And as we are going through each section, we want to understand when is the time that you were in this particular state of mind. And then we're also going to talk about some of our experiences and things where we were dealing with one of these particular states of mind. So we'll first just dive in and talk a little bit about what is an emotional state of mind. And so the emotional state is exactly what it sounds like. It's the emotions basically control you. and you're basically just in a reaction mode of how it is that you're responding to whatever happens. And Kate and I
Yep.
were talking earlier. This is really a lot of times, we talked about this in past episodes. So like fear, for example, is a big emotion that a lot of people tend to go to. And a lot of times it has to do when we're triggered or we haven't really dealt with our trauma in the past. A lot of times we'll immediately go to that reptilian brain, and it's the emotional side that is coming out. So it's typically when you sort of regret the things that you may have said as well, because you're letting that emotion immediately take over. And so it's your behaviors and even your personality seem to change, with your emotions. So someone that is always in an emotional state, they tend to always sort of go with however their emotions are at that time.
Yep. The other things I want to mention here is, emotions lead to thought, or thoughts lead to emotions, or emotions lead to thoughts. It kind of happens both ways. If you are one to struggle with awareness around your emotions, like I am one to struggle with that. I have a trauma brain, right? So like when I am scared, I go quickly to that reptilian place, and sometimes I'm so scared I don't even know I'm scared, right? Or I'm so something that I don't know. So then what I do is try to focus really hard on, okay, what are some other things? Like, what are my urges right now? Like, an urge to like run away, is related to an emotion of fear, right? But you don't, unless you kind of put yourself into the point of recognizing the urges you're having, as well as the body sensations, right? So, everybody, when they feel an emotion, has a physical reaction, but it's, if you aren't quite in touch with your body or have struggled with that, like it takes a minute to literally notice, to pay attention, and those are all clues that you're in the emotional mind space.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
it can also, one other thing I want to add is that I usually associate emotional mind with like a negative place, right? A negative emotion. But this can happen if you are really happy too. So like I've done a wise mind around getting a tattoo, right? Because I was like so jazzed, excited, but like, and just want it. I want it. And then, I had to weigh the rational side around, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but it can be a positive or a negative thing. So watch out for that, and then some people that struggle with mental health, they're like a person that has bipolar, really kind of knows this world, right? Because their emotions are kind of extreme. So, they can be manic and have to kind of watch out for how that state of mind is affecting them.
Yeah. And I can tell you that people that have gone through different trauma, I know for me, mine was control. And so I always wanted, and it had to do with fear, and it had to do with being protective of myself. And so a lot of times the emotional side is very reactive. So it is immediately going to what your instincts are telling you, that reptilian is saying, protect yourself. That's the purpose of the reptilian. It's just like whenever you have fire and you accidentally touch it, your body immediately reacts back. So the emotional side is the same type of way, especially when you've had trauma. It's just an immediate reaction that you start to learn. So it's now through, as we start to go through this, we'll talk about the wise mind once we get there, and how you can understand the emotional side, understand the rational side to get to the wise mind. But it's first acknowledging this piece of the things that you do that are reactive and are reactive in an emotional way. And the other one that I want to point out is the distorted judgment. A lot of times people don't even recognize that they're judging people. And I actually have an example of this as we start to get into the wise mind. For me, one of the things that I was recently experiencing was someone that was very much going to the emotional side, not looking at the rational side. And I was trying to come at them in a wise mind of trying to understand their point of view, but also getting them to go beyond that emotional state of expecting that everyone is going to be like them. And so in the emotional side, you'll also see sometimes people that are all over the place and have a hard time focusing. And that's a lot of what you were talking about, Kate. A lot of times you'll see that, sometimes even more in people that are having real mental issues, that are struggling. But this could just be people just in general that they are dealing with the day to day, and their thoughts are all over the place, and they're having a hard time really focusing. That doesn't necessarily have to be a mental issue. I think that we can all relate to those. Like sometimes I'm just like, the other day I remember Tim was reaching out to me and saying, hey, like I need this information. And I was just like, I just can't. Like I was like so emotionally drained that I was like, this is when I will get back to you, but I can't get it to you right now.
Yeah.
And I was like having to like shut down, and I ended up going out and I ended up getting something to eat, came back, felt so much better. But I was recognizing in myself that I was getting very emotional and whenever I get emotional, sometimes I might get very short. I'm like, I can't deal with this. Like it's overwhelming feeling right now.
Yes. I have recently one of my therapists has said, you might want to put that on vacation. You might want to put that issue on vacation and deal with it later. And that is a wise mind choice. Like that is a decision you make. And how I kind of looked at it is like, I'm super emotional. Obviously I know that there's a rational counterpart that I could dig into, but because my emotions are so high and I haven't quite figured out how to address them, so I'm like vulnerable to them, I'm going to put it on vacation, like, and just set it aside for a while and come back to it. And that will help a bit. I'm curious, what you guys have experienced around this, or I'm sure that you can relate to this and have experienced this, but if there's anything that you guys want to share around, or point out things that, maybe you've experienced that we haven't addressed. But would love to hear about any, times that you've been in an emotional state of mind that you're willing to share with us.
Yeah. I would love it if people share that. And so while we are going to the rational side, go ahead and feel free to add that in there. Those that are joining us afterwards as well, be sure to add something in there, times that you felt like you sort of learned. Maybe it's even an aha moment of, oh, I realized, just like with me, it was the control thing. Like I was able to correlate that back to my trauma and recognize, okay, this is sort of my reactive. This is sort of me whenever I become triggered, ultimately.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
So Kate, the rational brain. I have to tell you, last night, my husband and I played a game, and I forgot what the name of the game is, but it's like different levels. So it's like level 1, it's it's how people perceive you. So you ask questions, and it's how people perceive you. Then the next one is telling more about yourself and how things about you ultimately. And then the third level is like getting really deep into it. And one of the questions, I think this was on level 1, was, do you see me as creative or analytical? And it was funny, both my husband and Jamie, that question happened to come up for me, for both of them, whenever I played it the 2 different times. And I'm curious, which way do you think both of them said?
I think they probably said more on like the rational side, right? Like
on the analytical side?
Analytical, rational, like logical mind, because they see a lot of times strong people, you know, are viewed by their community as like totally logical, right? That these decisions kind of come really easily to them because they are so strong. That's my
Yeah,
assumption.
it was. So they both said analytical.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, but I also do feel like I have a really good balance of the creative side, but it's not always something people really see as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so, but the
Right.
rational side here is really about that. It's you're using logic, you're using facts, but the challenge with that sometimes is sometimes you can disassociate yourself and sort of remove any emotional aspect of things and just look at it from a point of view of the stats, the
Yep.
statistics, and removing all of the emotional sides to almost become disassociated with whatever the decision is or whatever the challenge may be. So I think a
Right.
lot of times when you think about CEOs, for example, a lot of times they will use their rational brain to feel okay about like firing a bunch of people and things like that because they're looking at the rational side, but they're not always looking at the emotional side. And sometimes there is a combination. Like you could potentially do something else, but they're just looking at the numbers. So therefore they're disassociating and it's just going to become the rational side that they're focusing on.
Yep. Definitely. I think that that happens a lot in leadership, right? And it makes the rational mind a little easier to dig into when you can separate your emotions. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times in business, they tell you to do that, right? Like that's
Right.
kind of a, you know, like don't get emotional at work. Don't, you know, and the truth is that like as humans, we do have both and it's really hard to wrap your mind around both, right? It's easier. It's like an escape to just rely on the rational mind. Um, and so that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of times it's really clear, like, okay, yeah, I'm using logic, I'm using facts. But sometimes the rational mind is just basing those facts are actually past experiences. So they're just basing it on like what has happened in the past. When this happened last time, or when something similar happened to this is how, you know, it ended up. And so, you know, notice that in yourself, like when you are when you are going through the process of making a decision and you are relying heavily on your past experiences, that is rational in and of itself because you're checking the facts. That's logic.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, and I'd be curious what people think about this, is that I first was going into criminal justice. And so I actually
Mhm.
interned with a police department, which I don't think a lot of people realize that that was sort of my background. And I studied psychology. And one of the things that I did find is that a lot of people that are in the medical industry and in the policing uh, with law enforcement and things like that, I think that a lot of them might have to go to their rational brain and not their emotional, because a lot of times they have to push things over to this rational side to basically
Mhm.
maintain composure. So they're keeping calm with the problems
Right.
that most people would be upset about. So they almost have to do that in a protective way. But it's when it
Mhm.
goes too far, I think sometimes that that's when sometimes abuse can happen because they're disassociating that person as a human being,
Right.
that they are so in their rational brain that this person did this, so therefore I should be able to do this. So
Yeah.
they're trying to go to almost the opposite. And so I don't know,
Yeah.
I just thought of that, and I'm just curious whether people would agree with that, or what your thoughts are. I'm going to
Yeah.
pull up.
I completely agree. Yeah. Pull up Bruce's comment about you because it kind of goes
Oh,
back to like what you were saying. So
so creative.
creative.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I see you, Sarah, as creative. I think your creativity enhances your analytical because of the depth of your insights, which are as a result of your creativity.
Yeah.
I completely agree, Sarah. I think, and you've mentioned this before, you have a lot of empathy. So I think you do often have a really nice balance of the rational and the emotional, and because of just who you are and what you work in, and of course your values. What you work hard to be.
Yeah. I like that. I like what Bruce said. I do consider myself actually a very creative person, but I do think that I rely upon the analytical side a lot.
Right.
But I do think I balance it as we start to get into the whys. I really am always going back to that emotional side as well to make sure that I'm balanced there as well.
Yeah, and in terms of like law enforcement and other other positions in healthcare, doctors, nurses, anyone who is serving, even teachers, when you are serving a group of other humans, it is really hard to allow the emotional side to come into play because your goal is to help, your goal is to serve. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to kind of follow a chain of command in your mind, right? Like when this happens, these are the things I do to try to help. And that becomes rational because it is a lot, it's in order to remember all of those ways to help, you have to kind of follow a pattern of thinking. Interestingly enough, Jenna actually went down the same kind of path. So when we first got together, 17 years ago, she was very interested in criminal justice. She was attending school to go to criminal justice. She was very, she's very into crime, true crime, and she likes that. And so was very interested. She got into the police academy. She actually had a conversation. A police officer had come to our house and was speaking with her as one of the last steps in Milwaukee. That's included as part of the steps sometimes. And he looked around at our pictures, at what our house looks like. Jenna was just starting to kind of homeschool the three kids. And he said, it looks like you're going to be really great at this. You've passed all these tests with flying colors, but you really want to think about this other aspect of your life. And he looked around and he said, to me, it looks like you look like someone that would be, that would really struggle being a police officer and, balancing that with everything else. And you seem to be a fairly sensitive, emotional, loving person. You want to think about how is that going to impact your life? And that conversation was a game changer for her. She ended up completely changing her mind based on, that conversation. And she's kind of really grateful that she had that experience.
Yeah. I think though in law enforcement, there's definitely the need for brute strength in what it is that they do. But there's also this component that I think, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that because they have to go to that rational side to sort of remove themselves from the situation in a lot of ways, sometimes that emotional side of connecting to humans is missing. And that's where I think the crisis health individuals are really needed, because they're then the opposite. They're thinking about the emotions of a person and really thinking about how it is the trauma that has happened to them and understanding how trauma can be triggered and things like that. And that's where I think a lot of times within our policing, there needs to be a change. It's not that we don't need the other, what we currently have. It's that we also need this other side as well to balance it out,
to truly serve, right? Because and when you look at stats, at crime stats and other things in other countries, the ones that have been really successful, like New Zealand and in Australia, what they have done, what they've been able to kind of embed into their society and into the way that they enforce their their laws is a combination of both, so they're not relying on every person to be able to balance all of this, because
Right.
in reality you can't, or it's very hard to. But you can have just what you're talking about. You can have someone on the team that is representing the more logical, historical, rational side, and you can bring in someone else on the emotional side to really complement each other and to be more comprehensive in the way that they are serving.
Yeah. And you have seen some police officers that are really actually good at the wise side as well, that they do balance.
Oh, yeah.
But when you really think about it, they're focusing more on the rational side when they're training people versus the emotional side, which I consider a little bit more the human side of,
Right.
of things. And so
Right.
you and I didn't have that plan today, but that was something that just sort of came to me. And I
Yeah.
love that we were just able to easily go into these different types of conversations.
Yeah. I've definitely interacted with police officers that were able to have a balance. Now, most of the time, those are in fairly non-chaotic situations when you really think about it from a different perspective. Like maybe, it's chaotic for the people that are interacting with the police because, they're involved in a situation. But at the end of the day, if it's not a crisis, the police officer who also has, may have trauma even just from their freaking job, right? So, as soon as those really highly intense situations occur, like with, guns or other things get involved, it is in their very nature to go into the rational in order to handle the situation.
Yeah.
Even though probably everything in their body is having an emotional response.
Yeah. So it's an interesting topic. And we're going to continue to get into even more topics as we go into this. So the wise mind. So we talked about the emotional side. We talked about the rational side. This is really a balance between the two. This is helping you with decision making that helps you to have more of a healthy decision making process of really looking at both the logical and the emotional side. And you're really doing that in different ways. So you're incorporating intuition. For me, that is one of the things that I pull upon is the emotional side, is that intuitive side to me. Like I can see something, I'm like, yeah, this is very logical, but why is my intuition telling me don't do this? And so it is sometimes balancing those two, and sometimes sitting back is also the biggest thing. So slowing down, resisting the urge to be impulsive, that is when I have found that I do much better. So sometimes I'm really good at immediate decisions as we're talking with clients and doing those types of things. But sometimes whenever I can tell, like, this is a really important decision, I need to slow down and give myself some time. I might tell a client, for example, let me go back to my team, talk internally. And so it is then slowing down the decision process instead of immediately feeling you got to give them an answer. Sometimes it's slowing that urge down and saying, okay, let me evaluate and understand a little bit more internally on how it is we can help you.
Yep. I think for me, I end up using this entire like mindset as kind of a tool, right? So there are things that you can do like slowing down that can make you more effective in getting to, the wise mind. And it's problem solving at its core, right? So at its core, being a problem solver will, you leveraging different tools out there that can help you, whatever resonates with you. But this is one of them that can help you, get to what you really truly want to do. And this last bullet around value-based decisions, when you are clear on your values, you are able to balance both sides and then figure out, okay, now that I've looked at this from all angles, what what needs to be my decision and what is most aligned with my values.
Yeah. For me, the wise mind, I think, also will take into consideration when they recognize that people are coming from an emotional or a rational mind as well. So it's also figuring out how can I also navigate this? Because a lot of times when you recognize that people are coming from an emotional state, that means that they are already triggered. And you also have to think, how do I not continue down this path of continuing to trigger this person? So it may be just saying, hey, I see that right now this is a very emotional conversation. It sounds like maybe we both also need to step away and then come back. It was, interestingly enough, I saw this show where they were doing this experiment and they were almost getting the couples to get irritated at each other on purpose because they were doing like an experiment, and they got them all both hyped up and upset at each other. And then they would say that, oh, there's a malfunction with like the camera, we're gonna have to take a break. And so they would take a break on purpose for these couples, and just having that 15 minutes away, all of a sudden the next time they came back, they were both in a more of a wise mind. They've slowed down what was going on with them, and they weren't immediately coming after each other. They said that just by having that happen, and were doing it on purpose, and they said it with every single couple slowing down, getting away, and then coming back, they then were able to have, then the person that was counseling them would then help them along the way. But they were able to slow down and sort of stop and sit back. So I thought that was a funny experiment to sort of get them riled up and then go, oh, sorry, we can't talk about this anymore because the camera has broken down.
Yeah. I love that. That's one of the biggest that is when I am able to do that, that is so successful for me.
Yes.
And I've had a therapist actually tell me, don't speak to your partner until you can look at them, hold their hands, smile, and remember why the fuck you married them. Because yes, especially when in a conflict, right? Because at the end of the day, most of the time, unless you are in a relationship that simply isn't working, but the majority of the time, you do get to a resolution that makes things better, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the payoff that you get there, and how much stress are you inviting into the conversation, or how much negative energy are you putting into that path to get there, that could be avoided if you just let yourself get to the end faster, right? Just get to the end faster. The other thing I wanted to mention about that break, that's an awesome experiment. I love that. I also know that science backs that up, and then sometimes you can't give yourself 15 minutes, right? Like sometimes that's just impractical. But what the research out there has shown, that if you are able to even allow yourself 90 seconds, 90 seconds outside of the conflict or the situation that you're involved in, those 90 seconds actually, there's a change that happens in your brain, and you're able to breathe better. And there's actual biological things that are happening where you're able to kind of come down and be better after that 90-second break. So it doesn't have to be 15 minutes. I think 15 minutes often gives you way more time to find the effective problem-solving path. But if you don't have that, give yourself at least 90 seconds and try hard to just focus on your breathing while you're doing those 90 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say the feeling grounded, which is one of the bullet points here. That's huge. And I have found that if I just say, give me a moment, And I just focus on breathing in and breathing out, and it helps to regulate. And this is actually a Navy SEAL trick that they have in. And so if you know someone that's a Navy SEAL, or people that have had to deal with like real intense situations, this is actually something that they do to try to bring all of that back down to normal, to almost to it's basically feeling grounded in order to go and execute upon whatever it is that they're about to do.
Yeah. 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 And a lot of things in the military come from science. Like they're backed by science. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So this, as I've talked about, this framework can be used as a tool. So like, and I use it most often when I am in an emotional mind and I need to find the wise mind. But in order to do that first, I have to flip over and think about the rational for a bit. So
Do we want to go to the next one, which is how to develop a wise mind?
Yes. Yeah. Oh.
I had to sneeze.
Yeah.
Luckily, I put it on mute because it's really loud. And so we've been talking a little bit about how to develop a wise mind. So focus on the present. And the biggest thing is to stop ruminating on the past, which is one of the most difficult things, I think, when we're triggered by that emotional side, or even sometimes on the rational side of, well, that's just what they've done. We're going to the rational side of things. So the past can really correlate with both the emotional and the rational side, depending on how we look at it. Yep. So a lot of times it's just being in the present. Okay, what can we do now? So let's not assume that they're going to do X, Y, Z. Let's also not deal with all of my past triggers. And so what is it in this moment, being in the present, I can do about this situation?
Right. Yep. I love this. So it's acknowledging all the sides and then being able to really come up with what that wise mind decision is, where those two areas are meeting, is really your sweet spot.
Yeah. And so it's really just processing the thinking or the thought aspect of the facts, and then also feeling at the same time and having acceptance with both of those. And so it's really, I call this the human experience. The human experience is really accepting the emotions, but it's also looking at then the logical and analytical side of things as well.
Yeah.
And that's really what brings out my wise mind decision is. And so it's acknowledging both. And so Kate, you have an example of one that you had to go through.
Yeah, I actually sat down and wrote this out because I had so many emotions around this. So some of you know that my father, I think I've mentioned it before, but my father-in-law lived with us for 3 years. After he got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. And one of the reasons why he lived with us was because of what we had experienced, like maybe a year and a half prior, which was a really tragic, traumatic situation where my mother-in-law literally died in Jenna's arms, and it was bloody and it was awful, right? So she had intense PTSD after this, and a lot of therapy and healing to do, because she was young, her mom was young. It was very unexpected. So and she lived with us. She had just moved in, but didn't move in because of a sickness, right? So that happened. We were doing our best to recover from that, and then Bob, her dad, and Jenna's an only child. So her dad then got this diagnosis. So for us, it was like, he's got to come live here. At the time, he lived in Oklahoma, and we were like, he's got to come here. We can't manage his care remotely. It's hard. Because as you may have watched one of the episodes with Jenna in the past, but her dad also had some cognitive issues, some other mental health stuff and a pattern of or a history of addiction. So he did not read very well. You know, there were all sorts of things that were impacting our ability to care for him from a distance. Also, we were like, okay, here's an opportunity to hopefully like make it a little different this time. We can't say, oh, okay, universe, you know, really, Alice just died, and now you're going to throw this whole Bob situation at us. What the fuck, you know? So Bob had been living with us for 3 years, and we got the dreaded, you know, you got about 6 months to live max, you know, and it could probably be less. And at the time, I was Bob's one of Bob's primary caregivers. You know, Jenna was also heavily involved, and Bob and I were together. And he asked me a question. He was like, "How should I live out the rest of my life?" You know, because I could look at this from one way where I could really protect myself from future infections. I could stay safe, you know, or I could look at this like, I'm going to just have a blast because I don't have much time left. But the consequence of having a blast is that he could end up in a situation where, you know, his end of life isn't comfortable, right? Because if he were to get an infection or pneumonia or something, that would be hard. So of course, as you can imagine, the emotional side, I had intense fear. And I knew that because my body was telling me that. I was nauseous. I had the lump in my throat as we were talking. I felt really hot, you know, and most of my fear was around, oh my God, what, you know, here we are, here we're at the crux of it. How are we going to do this in a way that will make Jenna and Bob, you know, as comfortable as possible moving forward? And then my action urge was to run away, which is often, you know, an urge that comes with fear. Like, okay, fuck it all. You know, I'm just not like, I don't know, Bob, do what you want. You know, I can't be a part of this decision. So then I had to sit down, and I literally came into my office that evening and I sat down and I was like, okay, here's all the emotions I'm feeling. What is the rational? And I had to ask myself these questions. Okay, check the facts, Kate. What is past experience with this man told you with Jenna? You know, obviously it could totally impact her PTSD. You know, I knew that. And that's what I was afraid of. But the other aspect is like, he hated pain. He hated needles. He was terrified. You know, there are all sorts of things that were telling me what I should maybe suggest. But then it dawned on me, this was kind of the aha moment that I would not have gotten to had I not gone through this exercise. All of a sudden it dawned on me, like, I'm being asked to make this decision. And in one way I kind of felt honored, but in another way I was like, wait a second. I've known this man for a long time, and he always has a freaking opinion. Always. So why is he asking me this? Why is he, you know, so that was a turning point for me, because when I then thought about Jenna's PTSD in a rational, logical way, and I thought about the fact that this was unusual behavior for Bob, I was able to clearly see that instead of making the decision myself, because I wanted to, I'm good in emergency, like, and I felt really protective of both of them. But really what my decision was to get them in the same room talking and empower them to make the decision together, because Bob was worried about Jenna and Jenna was worried about Bob. Right. And together they needed to just make the decision and figure out, you know, and that aligned with my value, because my value going into this was to primarily do the best I could for my wife, and secondary, do the best I could for Bob. Right. So that aligned with my value. And that's what but I know that I would have never been able to make that decision had I not sat down and used a tool.
Yeah.
So that is what, that's, you know, I think a great example.
Yeah, I love that. And had you not sit down and really gone through this, you never would have had that aha moment of like, wait a minute, why is he asking me this? Oh, well, he's asking me this because he's concerned about Jenna, and Jenna's worried about him, which is very logical.
Right. But I was, you know, when I was in the emotional mind, you know, I was in a whole different space. And those things would not have occurred to me until I sat down and was like, what are the facts that I need to check?
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah. And so many times we are so stuck in our emotional state of things in these types of situations, or sometimes we go to the other, depending on how your thought process or what you tend to do. I do tend to see that people go to one or the other. I feel like that people either go to the
yeah.
fact side or they go to the emotional side. It's then merging a lot of times the two together.
Yeah. And at the end of it, I ended up feeling really blessed because I was able to help. I was able to help them problem solve. And they were way too far in their emotion minds, and for good reason, right?
Right.
You know, Bob knew he was confused toward the end of his life. He also knew that he cared more than anything about Jenna. That was his primary concern. You know, and Jenna obviously she was losing her dad at, you know, at a young age, and too soon after losing her mom. And, you know, and they would have had a really hard time getting to the understanding the rational, because they were so in the thick of the emotional mind, you know. So hopefully they would have worked it out had I not been involved. But I think it was a blessing in a lot of ways that I was involved and able to get them together and, you know, to make the decision. And what they ended up doing was a balance of both, you know.
Mhm.
They ended
That's
up,
right.
you know, they ended up being like, okay, you have liver cancer and you were a big drinker for many years and you've been sober for 10 years, but you know what? You want to have a couple beers, Bob? Go for it. You know, let's see how you feel after. Don't go on a freaking bender, you know, but
Right.
you know, and they ended up balancing it. And that's how we ended up coming up with the idea that we had to have a celebration of life party, have a funeral
Mm-hmm.
before he was gone. And it ended up being super successful. But I don't think we could have gotten there had we not been able to make that wise mind decision.
Yeah. And I want to sort of also point out that it doesn't always have to be something that's this huge of a situation. So I
Right.
actually have an example of one for myself. Is I deal with this, I feel like, every weekend. And so every weekend,
Yes.
my husband and my daughter are go, 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 go. They are full of energy. They want to do. And I get to the weekend and I really need self-care. Like I just need to give myself some time, some downtime. And so I struggle a lot of times that I want to make them happy. I want to do
Right.
what it is, you know, I want to spend quality time with my daughter. And so I've gone through this process doing exactly this and not knowing that it was the wise mind until Kate ended up sort of sharing this with me. And so with the looking at the wise mind, I was looking at the emotional side. The emotional side is I'm tired. Like I just want time to myself. And so I'm thinking about that, but I'm also thinking about, well, you know, now I also sometimes bring in the guilt. Oh, but if I don't, you know, that type of thing. So I'm thinking on the emotional. Then the logical side is, well, Sarah, you need some downtime. You know, you deserve this, and all of these, you know, logical things that are going on. But really, how I balance the two is, okay, well, how about I dedicate a day? So one of the days on the weekend, I will do something quality time with my family, but the other day is a me time. So I balance the two by looking at, I know that I logically also want to make sure that I have quality time with my daughter because
Right.
that's important to me from
That's your value.
my value. And so I want to make sure that I'm not just letting the weekend go by and not spending some type of quality time. Because me, I could just like, you know, just let me chill out. You know, let me just I could take the entire weekend. So for me, I had to balance the two. It's like, Sarah, no,
Yeah.
you really do need to also do this other thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that's a common thing, right,
Mhm.
for people. And I think what you're also maybe role modeling for others is you can do both. You don't have to do all or nothing. A
Right.
reset is very important. But so are your connections,
Yeah. And I think the key thing that you focused on or that you hit upon was going back to values. So, what are
Mhm.
my values? Is this decision in alignment with that, the things that are important to you in life as
Mhm.
well? And so, for me, it is balancing my well being, making sure that I'm not going to overdo it because I tend to do that.
Mhm.
That is my thing. And so I do have to find that I give myself downtime because otherwise I end up regretting it because I end up getting sick or things like that. So I know that
Mhm.
that's something I have to do. And then the other aspect of it is I want to spend quality time with my daughter because I
Mhm.
have a limited amount of time with her. And
Right.
I also, my job as a parent is also to make sure that I'm helping to
Mhm.
have her grow as an individual and but also just having that time with her. So it's really finding that balance between the two.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a great wise mind decision, and I hope more people are able to do that, and um, so you are no like you feel the guilt, but you're able to balance it
Mhm.
with what is an important aspect of your life. You have
Yeah,
an intense job, and your goal is to reset in order to be more effective for that. That's also a value of yours.
it is.
But balancing that with a value of spending time with your kiddo, because yeah, she's only going to be this age once. you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and but it's also as I continue to grow as an individual, setting healthy boundaries is also my value. And so I
Yes.
always try to look at things and say, and you'll notice in that the slide that talked about a wise mind, it was also about boundaries and it's about
Mhm.
healthy boundaries. So it's knowing, and that's also where you can then get rid of the guilt. You know that, okay, well, logically and emotionally, this is what I need. So if
Mhm.
it's logically and emotionally what I need, then there should be no guilt. Like I'm doing
Right.
what is best to make sure that I'm healthy and that I'm setting myself up for connecting with my daughter and while also taking care of me. I think a lot of times people use an or. So it's this or it's this. Well, why can't it be both? Why can't we use
Right.
and? How can I make it this and this?
Yep. And then you get the added benefit of the fact that you're also modeling to Riley. Here's how
Yeah.
you set healthy boundaries. Here's how you prioritize taking care of yourself. It's really important for extroverts to do that. And Miss Riley is very extroverted, right? So,
You
so
know, I think she's an in between, honestly. And so
yeah,
I think, what is that, an ambivert? I think she's actually a good combination. I've actually found
yeah.
that I'm actually an ambivert. And the reason why is that I need to go have some downtime. I'm not like
Hmm.
a person that is constantly out there, but I like being out there. But I also need, sometimes I really do need, I prefer the one on one with people, is what I have found versus like group
Hmm.
settings. And then I also do need my downtime.
Yep. Yeah.
Would you consider yourself more an ambivert?
I do, yeah, because I definitely get energy from interacting with people,
Mhm.
but I have a battery, and so in my work I have to extend that battery, and the phone is a good medium to do that with, so I
Mhm.
can kind of separate a little bit with using the phone, but I really do need a lot of downtime. In between, and in the physical world, like going to very similar to you in terms of one-on-one is a little better for me
Yeah,
than one on many.
yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'm good
So
at the one on many, but
mhm.
it's not something that I guess I completely enjoy. Like I
Mhm.
prefer, like if it was my preference, I would go one on one.
Yeah, I'm good at one-on-many as well, but it's only when I have a goal or a value to align with. So
Exactly.
usually in a sales situation, where I'm like, okay, this is your job today. You were working this
Mhm.
conference and you can do a good job and you do it,
Oh, yeah.
and then, yeah, exactly. But,
And I'm about to do that in the 4 weeks. And so we'll be surrounded
yes,
by tons of people that come up to our
yes.
booth and then our client event. And so it's going to be a hectic couple of weeks.
I love in your out of office message, you include a recovery day. She's like, here's what I'm doing this month, because there's a lot this month. She lays it all out, and then at the very end, she has it, and this is the recovery day. Love it.
I've just tried to also model for my employees that they should also have a recovery day. When we're going to a conference that you're on from 7 a.m. till midnight, you need a recovery day. Like you've worked your 40 hours plus that week.
Right.
So take the day off.
Yes. Recover, reset. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I hope that this was helpful for you all, and that this can fuel your Friday to continue feeling your badass self and to have a great weekend, people. I enjoyed today's conversation a lot and feel that it was valuable. What about you, Sarah?
I loved the conversation. I also loved the way we just talked about different types of things. And I don't know if you guys really know this about Kate and I, but we have an idea of the things that we're going to talk about, but it always is completely different because we're really just being raw with each other and just start talking with each other.
Yeah. And it's important for us to incorporate, you all as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that leads us down a different path too.
It does. And so I'd still love to hear from everybody. What did you think about today's show? Did it help you with maybe something you're dealing with in your personal life, or maybe it's something in your business life?
Mm-hmm.
Did this help give you just maybe a reminder? Sometimes these are things that we know, or we sort of know, it may be intuitively, but just sometimes having the reminder of, oh yeah, I probably should think of this and not just go to one or the other. So we're curious about your feedback on this.
Yeah. And the only other thing I want to quickly add is using as a tool. And I think we gave this as an example a couple weeks ago. But when you are in your emotional mind and frankly, you don't want to put the effort into figuring out the rational, or you feel as though you don't have time, or you simply can't, right? You're just like, I'm stuck here.
Mm-hmm.
Rely on a trusted person, and ask them like, okay, tell me objectively, let's go through the rational side of this or the logical side of this. So you don't be afraid to leverage other people that are in your life that can help you with these types of things too.
I think that's a great suggestion, Kate. Yes.
Yeah.
Great reminder. Yeah. And as a reminder, talking about reminders, next week is the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. And so we are going to have Roxanne on the show. She is a psychic medium. And so we're super excited to have her. And she's going to do a collective reading for people. There might end up being something that comes out. So if you have someone that maybe it's a spirit. So she also does talk to people that have, I don't know if she calls it passed over, but I think she calls it more in the spirit world. So if there's someone that ends up being really close to you, she might end up finding that person is knocking at her door and bugging her through the morning, and she doesn't know who this person is yet until she actually gets on the show. So it's quite an interesting experience to talk to her. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that you will come back next week, and we will see you then. And then the following week, we're going to be doing Goldilocks zone of thinking. So we're going to talk about that. It sort of wraps up the rest of this, sort of the two different ways we did the feminine, masculine, then this one, which is the emotional and the rational. And this one is a different way. You got a different tool that also helps you to think about and find that middle way to think. And then we're super excited. We have 3 people that will be speaking on November the 3rd, then on the 10th, and then on the 17th. So we have 3 interviews lined up in November.
Yeah, not to mention smack dab in the middle of all of that is going to be a really fun Halloween show where we're going to bring guests on and we're going to play a game, and I think it's going to be a blast. So look forward to that as well, people.
That's right. And we encourage you to take photos of yourself dressed up in Halloween gear, because we're going to be dressed up along with our guests. And so we just finalized or got everything finalized tomorrow for that. And so I'm super excited to have those 3 people on.
Yeah, we'd love you to post or send your pictures of Halloween costumes. We love to create like a collage or something, with our audience, pictures of our audience in their favorite costumes in the past, or the ones, that they plan to wear this year.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yes. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.